my fear of being seen wasn't even so much around the people who I was like working with or wanting to sell artwork to. They were strangers. It didn't matter to me really. Deep down, that wasn't where my fear was. My fear lied in my partner seeing me. My fear lied in my mother seeing me or my family, and what they would think or feel when, one, I shifted into a person who believes so deeply in the universe that I was not me 5 years ago, and what that would really look like and what they would think. And that's something that I had to work through in allowing my partner to fully see me and who I was wanting to become. Because also, when we're on this journey of growth as business owners, we're moving at a pretty fast pace into the version of the person who we want to become. And then when we get there, there's another version of who we want to become. And it's so that was a fear that I held pretty deeply in allowing him to see me.
Welcome to Side Note, the podcast, where we get real about what it takes to actually build something meaningful. I'm sitting down with power players and thought leaders to explore what makes us tick. From deep psychology to cosmic insight, from entrepreneurial wisdom to intuitive, divine feeling breakthroughs. Because success is about way more than what's in the business books. So join me for conversations that'll change the way you think about business, life, and everything in between. Chanelle is an artist and a business owner, and she is a successful artist. So she has made over $300K in her business, and she's developed some really beautiful work and has some interesting creative methods that we're going to explore in today's episode. But before I dive in too deep, Chanelle, do you want to give us a little intro for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I currently live very rurally in Nova Scotia, Canada. My studio is located in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, where I have access to internet. At home, I live with 5 chickens and a dog and no access to internet or TV, very in the woods. So I really love living in the quiet and allowing my creativity to flow through me. So about 3 years ago, I decided to go all in on my business and my dream life of becoming an artist after everyone told me it was a terrible idea. And it's been a really beautiful journey. So I started painting really from my past experiences and my heart. And because I was sharing so vulnerably, I quickly grew a business and was selling artwork all over the world, and it just blossomed so beautifully. But I also realized that people came to me and shared things with me that I wasn't exactly equipped to handle at the time. Things like my paintings reminded them of their son who just passed, or a friend that they had lost. And so I took it upon myself to become a counselor and practitioner, and I studied over the course of a few years to become certified to support other people, mainly through when they're viewing my work, but it really blossomed into another part of my business where I host retreats and combine experiences in artwork and bring them together. And yeah, so the business kind of blew up beyond what I had ever dreamed of. And it's been a really crazy journey, and I'm super excited to share it all with you.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I got chills when you said, people started sharing really intimate things with you and you started exploring, what does this look like on a deeper level, not just commissioning artwork, but commissioning artwork that tells a story specific to these people. And there are a couple really interesting things that you do as an artist. But before I dive in there, for our listeners, could you describe what your style of art?
Yeah, so I draw on canvas. You can kind of see one behind me here. I draw on canvas first, blind contour without looking at the paper. So it's a practice of meditation for me. It allows me to let go of my um, my perfectionist persona, and really just allow to myself to connect with my subject on a deeper level. It's not very often that we sit with somebody. I love drawing face to face, and so you're just sitting there looking at the person's face, and it's not very often that we get that intimate with a subject or an object. For me, mainly it's pieces of nature, and then I go back in and I add color and a lot of mixed media. So a lot of it's actually chalk and not paint, which is, I wouldn't even call myself a painter, but more just like a mixed media artist and kind of exploring different materials.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I think the blind contour method is so unique. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
So, can you walk us through how that works step by step? Because I'm really curious.
Yeah, so when I first went to university, I studied art and I showed up to my first year drawing class, and the entire year was drawing blind contour. And I was so mad. I hated it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought it was silly. So we would actually sit with our thumb under a magnifying glass and have to draw it for like hours. And my teacher knew if you cheated, but the process really involves you just sitting yourself in front of something. For me, nature is really forgiving. So even if you make like something that is a mistake, it's really not that obvious when you're drawing nature. So you sit down with your object and it's really connecting your hand to your eye. And it took probably about 5 years of practice for me to actually get something that resembled anything. And basically, you're connecting your hand to your eye and you're moving your eye and your hand at the same pace, almost like you're tracing what your eye is looking at. And anytime you can look down at the paper, but anytime you look down, your hand has to stop moving. And then you reconnect your eye back to your subject and you continue moving on. So it's just drawing without looking down and controlling what's there and what we hope to see.
Wow. And like you said before, the mindfulness practice of that to stay so present with the subject
Yeah.
sounds intense.
Yeah, and to sit and really observe, because we're often, when we're moving back and forth from the paper to what we're drawing, we're often skipping a lot and we're often drawing what we hope to see is there or a shadow that we think is there. And this really encourages, it's also uncomfortable for us. We don't usually sit that long uninterrupted, especially with people who have cell phones now. And it's just not an opportunity to receive very often.
Yeah. I imagine that your lifestyle without internet and TV also help that because you can fortify that sense of focus where if you do have internet and TV and you're constantly stimulated by many different things, many different types of media, I find it's more difficult to focus with that constant stream.
It is. And I find it also has an impact on your energy for sure and how you show up in the world. And I think one of the most important things, even when we're growing a business, is being very careful of who and what you surround yourself with. And that looks like media. Are you like unconsciously listening to the radio all day? And we also are kind of like all of the beliefs that we grow to have. One of the big things I had to do when I was growing my business from zero to where I'm at now is being willing to shift every single belief that I had and kind of admit that a lot of what I had grown to believe in wasn't necessarily true or had to be true. And those beliefs come from things like TV or people we grew up with or the radio. And so I'm really careful at like what goes into my lens and how I allow things into my world now.
Completely. And especially as an artist, like you said before, a lot of people are telling you you can't do this or you shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
What beliefs did you have to unwind during that beginning period?
Well, a lot. There's a lot. We're
You're
always
like,
told,
let me whip out my scroll.
yeah. Artists don't make money. Artists are starving. There is no way to really scale business as an artist because you are the one producing. Also, the belief that I had to make prints. The belief that I had to work with galleries, that they controlled who saw my work and who had access to it. Belief that I had to have exhibitions or show my work a certain way. And also as women, just beliefs that we're not supposed to be the ones really going for it, or that maybe I should be having children right now instead of doing, or that I can't have children and grow a business. That's also a belief that a lot of us carry. And I don't have children right now, but that's something that I've been really exploring lately, and new beliefs that I've been working on.
Yeah. Oh, I hear that. That's where I'm at too. I don't have children, but I do want children. And we're at the point we got married this year. And
Well, congratulations.
thank you. It's interesting to think about because becoming a mom for the first time, that's total uncertainty. You have no idea what it's going to be like. But you also have this business that you've tended to and cared for and created, put so much energy into. And, it's like, what does that look like after? And how do you balance the two?
Yeah, and I think it really, our beliefs going into it are really important. And, we can carry the belief that we're going to have to, like our business won't do as well, or things will be harder, or we can carry the belief that actually we get better at managing our time, and the things that aren't going well in our business fall away, and we get really particular about where we spend our time and energy, and therefore things grow even more. So it really, yeah, it's all just working on what we choose to believe.
Yeah, I love that. Have you by chance seen Inside Out too, the movie?
I have not.
Okay. Did you ever watch Inside Out, the first movie?
No, I might have to watch them both. I'm not sure. I don't
I think
remember.
you I think you'd like it. It's
Yeah.
so Inside Out, the movie, it's a Pixar film. And basically they have this cast of characters that are inside this little girl. And each character is an emotion. So one is joy, one is anger, one is disgust. And it's really well done. And the second one, I just watched it. It recently came out. But the second one is about how we create beliefs. And they're basically experiences that we have that then settle in this deeper part of ourselves and our brain. And then they form these, they show them in the movie like these kind of like glowing trees that come up and form. And they're really strong, right? Those beliefs then determine our actions and decisions. But it's so interesting that you were able to change these beliefs. So you already mentioned, the beliefs going into this specific phase of being an entrepreneur, a business owner, an artist, and a mom. What other beliefs do you now hold as a successful artist and business owner?
Great question. I think there are many that really, some of my core beliefs are that business is deeply a reflection of our energy. And when my energy is in the best place, my business is in the best place, I also show up as a better human. So the belief that really working on my energy is one of the most important things. The belief that my artwork can be in all of these places. I think more the belief that things are possible, and just that anything is possible. And it's really expansive to know that, like, when I dream or when I want something, I now know that it's, my mind isn't as much to shoot me down anymore. It doesn't go like, I'm not like, oh, silly mind. I'm like, oh, that's possible. And I see it for myself. How can I move towards it? And that's kind of what I move into at this point in my life.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's impressive too, because as a creative specifically, there is this large societal narrative that you can't be a successful creative and, it should be a side hobby or one of the 100 different stigmatized things around it. So, how did you break out of that?
Yeah, so I actually began putting myself in rooms with people who were doing the things that I was dreaming of, or also putting a really good support team behind me. I invested more money than I had at the time into a support person or a mentor, who helped me see more of the business side of artwork as well. That's something that we're not taught in school. We're taught that if you're an artist, you can't be good at business, or you shouldn't be good at business because it means you're not a good artist. And it really helped me open my eyes to what was possible. So putting myself in rooms with expansive people was incredibly helpful for me. And there's also a lot of practices. Like if you're working on rewriting your beliefs, I think one of the most common things we're given is to write your belief and then write the opposite. But when we do that, it shocks our nervous system and our body, and our brains can't even get on board with it. So if my belief is currently that I can't make money from selling art, and then I want to rewrite my belief, a lot of the times what we're told is to rewrite, like, I can make $1 million selling art. In that moment, there's no way my brain can get on board with that or grasp that. So what I really like to do is actually, so I work on rewriting my beliefs like every 90 days, which it sounds crazy, but I get out the big pieces of paper and I write them out. But my kind of secret step is to write the next believable thing my brain can get on board with. So if my belief is I can't make money from my art, maybe my next belief that I'm working towards that I can get on board with is I can make $500 from my art. And then from there, I move to the next thing my brain can get on board with. Instead of creating such a drastic jump with anything, it's like it's too much for our brains to conceive and our bodies and our hearts. So
completely. Yeah. I mean, part of that initial belief that we're trying to rewrite has been formed to protect us in some way. And so there is that kind of kind, small child piece of it. And if you just shout at it something that's unrealistic, it can be shocking.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I like the realistic steps. I think for goals too. Like I'm a business coach, so I work with a lot of clients who are like, I want to make $1 million. And it's like, okay, well, right now you're making about $1,000 a month. So let's figure out what the next realistic step is. Because to scale from $1,000 a month to $1 million a year is quite the intense scaling journey, and most people can't actually make that happen. And sometimes you don't want to scale that fast because it can lead to a lot of mistakes and failures later on.
That's very true.
How did you incrementally grew your business? And it's been interesting to see these different steps, right? You came out with a cookbook, the Nova Scotia cookbook. You have done commercial work. I saw recently you did that really huge, beautiful piece for a commercial space. And then you have the grief project too. So feel free to pick and choose where you want to speak to, but I would love to dig into some of that.
Yeah, so the cookbook came out when I was actually in university as a way to kind of pay for some of my way through university. So it was quite a long time ago, and interesting enough, it's a completely different audience. I used to draw tourist locations throughout Nova Scotia, and I used to try to sell prints at farmers markets. I say try because I never made my money back at all. And I did that for quite a few years because that's what I believed an artist was and how an artist in Nova Scotia came to be recognized. So the cookbook actually still sells on its own, and it's really fun. It's just passive income, and someone distributes it for me. It's really great. And now the business, so about 3 years ago, I started creating on canvas larger scale works. And within the first year, I did about 100,000 in sales, and really shocked myself. I never thought that was possible. And then the second year was around 110. And now this year it's just over 300,000. And I think really what happened was I stopped kind of racing for money from every direction and instead got really clear on where like a few streams that I wanted the money to come through that really lit me up and kind of put more energy and focus into those fewer streams. So I do work with a lot of designers, interior designers, and commercial builders throughout Canada and the US, which is a lot of the commercial work that you have seen and the product for the lobby. And then the grief project is something that I've recently started that's allowing my experiences that I love to create and my artwork to beautifully come together. So the grief project is kind of also a result of I've been painting from my own soul for quite a while, and I'm at the point where I've processed a lot and I don't want to just make for money and hope that someone connects with it and buys it, and it really just didn't feel good for me. So I'm actually doing something quite new and shifting away from just making artwork and hoping it sells to connecting with people, creating commissions from their stories, and also evolving into the Grief Project, which is where people can submit their stories on grief and I make a painting from them. And then a group of people that were selected. So at the beginning, I really thought I was only going to select 6 people to create paintings from, and I received way more submissions than I ever could have dreamt about. And I was like, holy shit, I think we have something that needs to be expanded here.
Wow.
So I did the first, I'm currently working on the first cohort of people and just moving through, and it's such a special and fulfilling project. And so in November, I was going to say at the end of the month, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In November, the people who were selected are actually coming together to have an experience and a dinner where they'll see their artwork. We have dinner surrounded by the artwork that was inspired by them, and they'll have the option to purchase it and see it for the first time and really just come together with each other. And I think grief is something that we all experience, no matter how we've experienced it in our lives. It could be loss, it could be just losing a friendship, it could be losing a pet, anything, or the loss of ourselves. And it really is an opportunity for us to come together and be together in community. So that's where the Grief Project has led me. So I'm trying to think, and also I host a retreat once a year, which is kind of the healing side of my business as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. The Grief Project in particular, I think stands out because, like you said, grief does hit everyone in different ways. I remember the first time I was talking to someone about grief, and I was like, well, at the time, I hadn't lost anyone close to me. So I was like, I don't know what grief feels like. And they're like, no, you can grieve something that it doesn't have to be directly linked with death. And it can be beautiful and it can take its own toll and it can be its own journey. Is there a particular story from one of your pieces, whether it's associated with the Grief Project or not, that you want to share?
Yeah. So I think also it's what we choose to do with the pain that allows us to expand into what is available for us within our grief. And for me, as a young child, I went through the loss of my father, and I actually physically did not bury him. He had left very abruptly. He was a very abusive man, and he ended up going to jail, and we flew across the country. And at the time, there was no space for me to grieve. It wasn't a common way to experience grief. It wasn't recognized. And I was like 12 years old. And of course, I had experienced many terrible things with my dad, but I had also experienced a lot of love. He was my dad. And going from having a father in your life to not is it's very valid way or very valid piece of grief. And it just wasn't given the time or the energy. And so I carried that grief with me for probably, I think I was in my second year of university when I finally broke down, and I was so angry, and I'm a very different person now, but I was just, I was full of anger and I had no idea where it was coming from, but it was all coming back to the grief of losing my dad. And it eventually got to a point where I was very sick. I was not taking care of myself. I was angry at the world. I was in my pain. And I had come to a place where I wasn't sure that I could continue anymore. And I ended up getting a dog who I always say saved my life. Her name is Maggie. She's a little golden retriever. She's 6 now. And she kind of slowly healed me through getting me back outside again. And when she ate, I ate. And when she was in the sun, I went in the sun and slowly found the light again through her. But I really recognize now, looking back, how important it is to have that space to grieve, but to also validate it in other people. And even if it doesn't look the way that we say it should or feel the way that we think it should, that it is valid. And also, I think it's what we now choose to do with the pain of losing somebody that can really propel us forward in this world. And I'm able to really recognize that if I wasn't to have lost him in that way or have had those experiences, I now wouldn't be here creating this art. I wouldn't be here holding space for other people. So we can choose to sit in our pain, or we can also choose to look at the beauty in all of the shitstorm that happens in every one of our lives. We all experience it in some way.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
so powerful. And I'm so sorry to hear that happened. But like you said, it's been such a source of fuel and healing. And yeah, just holding space for that because that is needed. And that vulnerability is needed to share your story, to share that story so openly. I think a lot of people will connect with that too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really, really important for us to give people the space and to also allow them to see that there's beauty in the most painful experiences that we have.
Mhm. Completely.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that it kind of came up for you to deal with when you were in art school.
That's very true. Yeah. It was also my first time alone in the world as well, like moving out of home. It's our university is a wild experience that I like.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're alone for the first time. Your mom doesn't cook for you anymore. Like you're on your own. And so it was really the first time I had to sit with myself and to process things, but also it is very interesting. And I don't think I've thought about that before and how it came up in art school. And I really held back in art school. I didn't, I made work that was very on the surface because I didn't know how to go in there and dive deep into what I was holding. And that's really when this work started to evolve, when I allowed myself to kind of open up and be seen.
Oh, yeah, that's a topic. That's a big one.
Yes.
Oh, so many good things in there. Yeah, I think sometimes we have experiences when we're ready to have them. Like I had a repressed memory come up once during a meditation retreat, and I think it came up because I was in such a solid, steady, peaceful state to handle that memory to resurface. And so it just sounds like it was the right time, the right space. You had this vehicle of creativity to help you transmute and process. And yeah, all feelings are valid. Like, I think that is definitely a theme that keeps coming up, not only in this podcast and my work, but in life of just like grief's going to look like however it looks like. And no matter how you feel, it's always valid. You just have to process it on your own terms.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I find that to be fascinating.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to be in community in those moments as well, because it it's one of the most universal things that we all experience in this life. Yet we shy away from having conversation about it or being open about it so often. And when there are safe communities for us to really sit in and process in a group and see how universal it is, it's really healing for a lot of us.
Yeah. And then being seen in that, which I want to go into even more because visibility as an artist, as a creative, as a business owner is a lot harder than it sounds. What is your journey with being seen as an artist and business owner?
I think I really had to let go of my want to control how people responded to things. And there's always those fears, they always come up. And I think the most important part is to, we're never trying to move away from the fear. It's always going to be there, but just to learn how to handle it better and to learn how to notice it and then move forward with it still being there and not letting it paralyze us. But especially when we're showing up so vulnerably. It is terrifying to be seen and to let ourselves be seen and heard in these new ways. And I think just having a really good support system and working on ourselves is, diving deep into why we're afraid to be seen, why we're afraid of the judgment, and getting really to the root of where that fear and where all of it stems from is really important. And I think for me, my fear of being seen wasn't even so much around the people who I was like working with or wanting to sell artwork to. They were strangers. It didn't matter to me really. Deep down, that wasn't where my fear was. My fear lied in my partner seeing me. My fear lied in my mother seeing me or my family, and what they would think or feel when, one, I shifted into a person who believes so deeply in the universe that I was not me 5 years ago, and what that would really look like and what they would think. And that's something that I had to work through in allowing my partner to fully see me and who I was wanting to become. Because also, when we're on this journey of growth as business owners, we're moving at a pretty fast pace into the version of the person who we want to become. And then when we get there, there's another version of who we want to become. And it's so that was a fear that I held pretty deeply in allowing him to see me.
Oh, yeah, it's wild the evolution that happens when you own a
It
business.
is very much.
It's looking at it from the outside, it's hard to comprehend how much of a like spiritual and evolutionary journey it is because you are constantly challenging and evolving your identity. And that is such a core piece we hang on to. And I remember when I made the jump, I had a marketing career for about 12 years before I decided I'm gonna go full in on my own business. I had had side businesses before, but it was that big leap over the chasm. And I remember I was talking to someone and I was like, yeah, I feel so new at being a business owner. I feel like I'm like a freshman again and that I don't know anything. And they're like, you have 12 years in marketing and you've had businesses before. Like you're not new. It's just a new identity because you're going all in on it. And that was really huge to hear.
Yeah. And do you still find that you bump up against the fear, or that you move with it?
Oh, yeah, no, I bump up against it. Yeah, we're little bumper cars all the time. The first time I posted on LinkedIn, I like had a small breakdown because I was so afraid of what people would think, especially people I've worked with in the past. When I started this podcast not too long ago, I came up around a lot of fear around being seen video specifically. I'm not afraid of being heard. I'm a very comfortable speaker. I love like public speaking and doing speeches and presentations, but there's something with video that there's like a very deep block. So that was something I had to wrestle and kind of come to terms with before I started recording and producing. And I think that's why I subconsciously delayed my podcast launch about a year.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And I find every time we finally move through the block or the fear, we're so deeply rewarded from the universe. And sometimes very quickly. It's
Mhm.
like this opportunity that we've been dreaming about just falls into our lap, or it's really interesting and kind of a game to me at this point. And it just makes me chuckle how quickly we're rewarded by things that scare the shit out of us.
Yeah, exactly. Every time I moved past those things, like the podcast, like it's going so well. It feels so good. I feel like I'm having all these guests like yourself that I feel so grateful to connect with you so deeply in such an interesting format. And then this will then live on that people get to connect with in the
Mm.
future. And so it feels really good. Like you said, it feels like you bump up this against this resistance, but then when you break through, it's like, oh my God, it feels incredible.
in our nervous systems realize that, a lot of the time the fear is just us wanting to keep ourselves safe. And it served us for a very long time as humans. Fear was a very great thing that, we just, when we show ourselves too, and we move through the fear, we realize we're still alive. We're still
We're
breathing,
okay.
still here. We did the thing. And, it wasn't as big as what we made it out to be. And we're still breathing. And then, next time we just do it all over again and we show ourselves over and over again. We can do terrifying things. And it's really freaking cool because we, for a long time, hold ourselves back. And it just doesn't need to be the case.
You do. And I found, like you said earlier, connecting with people and getting in the right rooms has been key for me to get through those moments because I think in with past businesses of mine, this is definitely the aligned one. Like I'm committed to being a business coach and a podcast host. I adore both. Like they feel so good. They don't feel like work to me. I'm like, I get to do this. This is incredible. But getting in the room with people who are similar, who have had similar fears has been so key so that I can be vulnerable in those moments to be like, hey, I'm terrified and everything feels like it's going wrong or it's really hard. And then having people see you and hear you in that space. And I know you mentioned, key rooms that helped you too. What's an example of one room that you came upon that really helped you, catalyze your journey through these fears?
As an artist, the first kind of space that I invested in that really changed my life was a mentor named Jessica Saran. And she hosts, it's like a 12-month program for artists. And it's kind of for artists who are just beginning and working on creating a business from their art or still trying to find their artwork. And that was really expansive for me. And I think now when people ask me how the business has grown so quickly as well, it's being willing to put myself in rooms that I maybe feel like I don't belong in or that feel a little stretchy and big for me. So investing in like I really love to go to retreats with other business owners, investing in programs as well, like my continuing to invest in my education as a practitioner is really important to me. And putting myself in those rooms, also putting myself in just like events. Find out where people are having events. Your aligned people, of course. It doesn't work if they're not your aligned people. For me, it's like events with designers and interior designers. Half the time I show up there, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. But I'm just gonna, show up and step in. And those are kind of the spaces where things really unfold and happen for me. So
Yeah.
it's really beautiful when we stretch ourselves a little bit and show up and also invest in ourselves and put ourselves in those spaces.
Oh yeah, sweaty palms, like business cards I just made in my back pocket. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm actually going to use them.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'll bring them with just in case, and then think about it for like 3 hours and finally pull one out. Yeah, yeah,
Lurk along the perimeter and see like who should I talk to?
that's me.
Who looks
Yeah,
safe?
I think it's just important to show up messy too. Like you said, maybe you made them an hour before. The point is you show up, and I think we all have this expectation that, like, as business owners, we have to launch. We have to work on our launch for like weeks and every font has to be perfect on the website. And to be honest, a lot of my money is just made by having conversations with people and there isn't even a sales page yet. It's like, oh, okay, you want to give me your money? Hang on, I have to make a link and showing up that way. It's just like it's it just takes showing up. Messy action is so good and so important.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard if you're a perfectionist or have perfectionist tendencies. I know you mentioned that. I'm in the same camp. I find a lot of people are. It's really hard. Sometimes I'm like, no, I need to build the whole program and all the pages before I market it. And sometimes that's not the case. It really is coming from conversations and then figuring it
Yeah.
out.
And it evolves. And I think what we kill our creativity and the evolution of a program too when we have to sit down and like map it all out before even for like retreats. There's the perfectionist piece of me that wants to have every detail finished. And when I work on my energy instead of working on trying to make every detail perfect, of course, that happens, 2 weeks before the retreat or a month before the retreat. But a year before, when I start selling it, or like 6 months before, it doesn't have to be that way. And when we calibrate our energy to that person instead, the retreat sells out in a couple weeks, and it's really incredible. And I think that's one thing that I've really, really started to play with more, is just the energy of things. And instead of getting caught up in the busy tasks, really working on putting my energy towards working on my own energy. And it has such a great reward. And it's really fascinating to see what happens when our energy is in high vibration and aligned with things we want.
Yeah, completely. I know. I was just thinking about how, well, actually, question for you. Do you ever do creative workshops virtually with people to help them tap into that creative flow?
No, I have never done that actually. I am, I really love creating like online retreats, but never specifically for tapping into creative energy. But that's really beautiful.
Okay. I have a mastermind group called The Greenhouse, and I want to bring you into it to do a creative workshop with the group because I think creativity is one of those core skills that you need to, I don't even know if is it a skill? How would you describe it? Creativity.
Hmm. I think it's something that's in all of us, maybe an expression.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's something that we don't always allow ourselves to express. So I'm not sure what exactly it is, but I know how important it is to be expressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's interesting to think about. I think it allows us to express and process. I think, yeah, like you said, everyone has it, but how do you tap into that? And I do find when you tap into your creative flow, you feel that alignment. You get the ideas that really matter that are going to have traction. So, yeah, we can talk about that more offline, but maybe I'll bring you in to do a creative workshop with the gals.
That'd be super fun. I definitely have some go-to things that maybe you don't even realize you do them, but they're some of your favorite things. And like I recently bought, those little trampolines that you used to bounce on when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I have one of those in the middle of my living room. I'm not even kidding. It's straight up in the middle of the living room, and I jump on it like probably twice a day. But it's fucking great. It gets things going, and it wakes you up, it makes you feel good, and it gets that energy moving. But there's all kinds of little things that I do that really put me in that place to allow things to flow through me. So I think as a creative person, we're always taught as well that we have to be really protective of our what we produce. And there's this idea that it comes from us. And what I really learned, I was getting really exhausted and not really understanding why I was so tired all the time. But it was really tied to the belief that all of the creativity came from me instead of through me as a vessel. And when I really shifted my ideas around how it came to me or from me or through me, it really shifted the amount of energy I have and what I can get done in a day, and also serving other people. We show up in groups as business owners, and oftentimes we're serving people. And after a retreat, I was like the introvert that couldn't speak for like 2 weeks after I hosted something. And I had to learn to channel that creative energy through me instead of from me. And from there, being a vessel, I came away with so much more energy. I'm not exhausted after retreats. And yeah, it was really beautiful discovery to allow it to come through.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm a Reiki master.
Oh,
One of my side businesses was Reiki energy healing, but that's the main thing they teach in training is that when you're energy healing, you have to let the energy come through you. It can't come from you or else you will be depleted. So that's really interesting, the connection there.
this is really cool. Very
Yeah.
interesting. I haven't studied any Reiki, but I didn't know that about you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I stumbled upon and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I don't know why, but I'm going to. become trained in Reiki, and then I ended up doing Reiki on myself and my parents' dog. He was quite older. My dog is younger and she won't have it. She's like too sensitive. And then I started a business and it ended up doing really well. And I do community events with it. And then actually when I coach, sometimes if we are playing with a modality like meditation or we're doing a visualization together, I'll bring in the Reiki healing and use it with the business. And that's been really interesting to play with too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's not something that happens all the time, but I think the energetics in our business is key. So that's really beautiful that you offer that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Chanelle, there are so many like amazing things we talked about, and I really do feel like we could talk for hours more about creativity and your art and all the amazing things you're doing. The Colorado trip you just went on, I think I saw your painting like on top of a mountain, which is so cool.
Yeah, I love taking paintings all over the world. It's
Where can people find you and follow along your incredible journey?
My first suggestion would be for you to find me on Instagram and follow me there. That's kind of where I'm most active and present in the world. And then, of course, I have a website where you can view and read about my work. And my Instagram is just at Chanelle Jefferson _, and my website's just chanellejefferson.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and let's connect later because I want to do a workshop with you.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review. It goes a long way. And I'm Samantha, your host. You can find me at growwith_Sam on Instagram. And you can find more about the podcast at sidenotepod.com. Thanks for listening.